Your only job is to keep the princess alive, the commander said, sliding the assignment file across the metal briefing table. Do not improvise. Do not socialize. And whatever you do, do not offend her species. Captain Adrian Cole glanced down at the file, then back up again with the calm expression that had earned him a reputation across 3 sectors as the most reliable human soldier in the Protectorate fleet. With respect, sir, he said evenly. When have I ever offended an entire species? The commander stared at him. You asked the Varelian ambassador why his people vibrate aggressively when excited. It was a tactical observation. It was their mating display. Adrian cleared his throat. Noted. The commander leaned back in his chair. This assignment is easy. No war zones. No insurgents. No atmospheric collapse. Just a diplomatic visit from the Archelian royal heir. She's brilliant, politically vital, and reportedly very perceptive. Perceptive how? She notices everything. Including lies. Good thing I don't lie. Good thing, the commander muttered. Your job is simple. Stay near her, watch for threats, and remember that if anything happens to that princess, several star systems will start pointing very large weapons at each other. Adrian nodded once. Compared to the disasters he usually handled, this sounded like a vacation. Humans had become the galaxy's preferred guardians for a reason. They weren't the biggest species or the most technologically advanced, but when humans were assigned to protect something, they treated the responsibility like gravity, constant and non-negotiable. He stood, collected the file, and headed toward Docking Wing 7. The Royal Shuttle arrived without fanfare, its polished hull reflecting the station lights like liquid silver. A small welcoming party gathered at a respectful distance, diplomats whispering quietly. When the hatch opened, the princess stepped out alone. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his shoulder, but there was nothing fragile about her presence. Her posture was perfectly aligned, her gaze steady and analytical, like someone who had already calculated every variable in the room. Her eyes settled on him immediately. Not the diplomats. Not the guards. Him. She descended the ramp with unhurried grace and stopped precisely 1 arm's length away. You are the human, she said. Her voice was calm, melodic, and entirely free of hesitation. Captain Adrian Cole, he replied. Assigned to your protection, Your Highness. She studied him in silence long enough that he became aware of his own breathing. Your stance indicates vigilance, she observed. Shoulders relaxed but ready. Visual scanning pattern suggests layered threat assessment. He blinked once. Occupational habit. Good, she said. I prefer competence. He decided he liked her already. The walk to the royal quarters was quiet, but not uncomfortable. He noticed quickly that she matched his pace without looking, adjusting automatically whenever he shifted position to keep himself between her and passing foot traffic. Observant was an understatement. When they reached her chamber doors, attendants stepped aside, allowing them privacy. The room beyond was enormous, more a suite than a chamber, with curved walls, soft ambient lighting, and a viewing window that spilled starlight across the polished floor. And at the center sat a bed large enough to host a diplomatic summit. He performed a quick security sweep out of reflex. No blind corners. 2 exits. Defensive architecture subtly built into the walls. Efficient. Acceptable, he murmured. You evaluate spaces as if danger is inevitable, the princess said. It often is. She turned toward him fully now, head tilting slightly as she examined his face. Tell me, Captain Adrian, do humans tire? Eventually. You will rest there, she said, gesturing toward the bed. He followed her gesture. Waited. Looked around again. There was no secondary bed. No guard alcove. No chair even remotely suitable for sleep. He returned his gaze to her, certain he had misunderstood. Apologies, Your Highness. Where exactly would you prefer I remain stationed? She indicated the same bed again, patient. With me. He was proud of the fact that his expression did not change. Years of military discipline were finally paying off. I believe, he said carefully, standard protocol recommends I remain near the entrance. On my world, she replied calmly. Trusted protectors share sleep proximity. Predators target those who rest alone. Ah. Cultural. Dangerous, but cultural. He chose his next words with surgical precision. I assure you, no predator will reach you while I am on duty. She stepped closer. Too close. His training catalog details automatically, the faint luminescence beneath her skin typical of Archelians, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way her gaze never wavered. Yet alongside the tactical awareness came something far less professional. Awkwardness. Are humans uncomfortable with trust? She asked. Not at all. Then this arrangement is logical. Internal panic began tapping politely on the inside of his skull. External composure held. My priority is your safety, he said. Proper rest enhances operational effectiveness. However, shared sleeping quarters could be misinterpreted. By whom? Everyone. She seemed to consider that. Reputational speculation does not alter physical safety. He opened his mouth. Closed it again. This was absolutely a test. It had to be. She moved closer still, studying him with open curiosity. Your pulse has accelerated, she noted. Baseline variation. You are avoiding direct eye contact. Environmental scanning. Your species is fascinating. He exhaled slowly through his nose. I can requisition additional furniture, he offered. A larger bed would be acceptable, she said immediately. That is not what I meant. She folded her hands behind her back. Does guarding not occur horizontally on Earth? He coughed. No. Curious. There was no teasing in her voice, only genuine interest. That somehow made it worse. He positioned himself beside the door, deciding that was the end of the discussion. For about 6 seconds. Then she asked, Does your heart normally beat faster when standing near me? Your Highness, I am compiling cultural observations. Please do not compile them out loud. She nodded once, apparently filing that away too. Silence settled for a moment before she spoke again, softer this time. You guard like someone who believes my life has value. The statement caught him off guard. It does, he answered automatically. Something shifted in her expression, subtle, but unmistakably warmer. A small smile appeared. Not diplomatic. Not strategic. Simply pleased. Then you should sleep, she said. I would prefer my protector conscious tomorrow. He remained by the doorway, arms loosely folded. I function well on minimal rest. That is inefficient. So is causing a diplomatic scandal. She seemed puzzled by that, but did not argue further. Instead, she crossed the room and settled onto the bed with graceful ease. Within minutes, her breathing slowed. No security drones activated. No automated perimeter lights. Nothing but quiet starlight and the faint hum of the station. Trust, he realized. Absolute trust. Hours passed. At some point, she stirred faintly and murmured something in her native language before drifting deeper into sleep. He found himself scanning the room less and watching her more, not out of distraction, but out of a strange, growing certainty that the commander had been wrong. This was not the easiest assignment in the galaxy. Because danger was simple. Danger followed rules. This was unfamiliar territory. Just before dawn, without opening her eyes, she spoke again. Captain. Yes, Your Highness? When you stand near, my mind is quieter. He did not know what to say to that. So he said the only thing that felt true. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in many missions, Adrian Cole realized the greatest challenge ahead might not be protecting the princess from the galaxy. It might be protecting his professional composure from a 5-foot-tall royal who had just invited him to share her bed, and meant it as the highest form of trust imaginable. By the third day, Captain Adrian Cole had reached a deeply uncomfortable conclusion. War was easier than this assignment. war followed patterns. Enemies announced themselves with weapons and bad decisions. Battlefields were predictable in their chaos. Princess Eris Tallery, heir to the Archelian Concord, was neither predictable nor chaotic. She was curious. And curiosity, he was learning, was far more dangerous. "Captain Adrian," she said one morning as they walked the Eastern diplomatic corridor, "why are you increasing the distance between us every 17 steps? I am not. You moved 12 centimeters farther away after the ambassador passed us. That was tactical spacing. There was no threat. There is always a potential threat." She slowed slightly, forcing him to either match her pace or look suspicious by continuing ahead. He matched it automatically. "Is the threat behind me?" she asked. "No." "Before me?" "No." She stopped walking altogether and turned toward him. "Then perhaps," she said calmly, "the threat is the concept of proximity itself." He stared straight ahead. "I assure you, Your Highness, proximity is not a threat. Your elevated pulse suggests otherwise." He had made the mistake of letting the medical scanner sync briefly with his armor during her arrival. Ever since then, she treated biometric data like conversational seasoning. "Humans have responsive cardiovascular systems," he replied stiffly. "Fascinating." They resumed walking. A group of junior diplomats stepped aside as they passed, whispering with poorly concealed interest. Adrian ignored them the way professionals ignored things, by pretending they did not exist at all. Eris, unfortunately, noticed everything. "They are observing us," she said. "They observe you everywhere. You are royalty. They are observing you more." He resisted the urge to sigh. Her curiosity had shifted over the past 48 hours from general human behavior to something far more specific. His behavior. It began with what she called Trust Exercise 1. "You will stand within arm's reach," she had declared during a security review. "That is unnecessary. It is optimal. If an attack occurs, reaction time decreases by 0.4 seconds. He could not argue with the math. What he had not prepared for was the constant awareness that came with it, the faint warmth radiating from her species' naturally higher body temperature, the subtle citrus metal scent unique to Archelians, the quiet rhythm of her breathing when they stood still. "You monitor my respiration," she observed at one point. "Threat detection. There is no threat. Preventative detection." She accepted this with a small nod, as though it were perfectly reasonable for someone to memorize her breathing pattern. Trust Exercise 2 had been worse. The diplomatic reception was crowded, layered with unfamiliar species and too many moving variables. Adrian adjusted position repeatedly, maintaining a protective angle. Then, without warning, she took his hand. Not dramatically. Not even hesitantly. Simply threaded her smaller, luminous fingers through his as though it were the most natural thing in the universe. His brain shut down for approximately 2 seconds, an eternity for a soldier. "Separation risk has decreased," she explained calmly. Several ambassadors stared. One dropped a glass. Adrian lowered his voice. "Your Highness, this is not standard guard procedure. Physical contact communicates trust," she replied. "Also, your hands are warm. This is reassuring." He became aware that he had not released her hand. He corrected that immediately. She glanced down at the empty space, then back up at him. "Did I misuse the gesture?" "No," he said quickly. "It was effective." Rumors detonated across the station within the hour. By evening, a logistics officer had saluted him with entirely too much enthusiasm. The following night, the bed returned as a tactical problem. Adrian had not slept properly since her arrival. He remained alert, stationed near the entrance while she rested. At approximately 0200 hours, she sat up and regarded him with visible concern. "Do humans rest effectively while sitting upright?" "Yes." "You have not entered REM sleep in 31 hours. He blinked. "How could you possibly know that?" "You mutter threat assessments when exhausted." He did not like that information being available. She shifted slightly, patting the open space beside her. Efficiency suggests adaptation. Every instinct screamed no. Every calculation regarding reaction time, endurance, and mission readiness said yes. So he compromised. He removed his boots, kept his uniform on, and lay rigidly on the far edge of the enormous mattress, leaving enough space between them to park a transport shuttle. She watched him for a moment. You appear uncomfortable. I am perfectly comfortable. You are not utilizing 40% of the available surface. That is intentional. She seemed to accept this and lay back down. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. He remained awake. At least, until he noticed something unusual. The security drones remained inactive. The automated perimeter, silent. No defensive protocols whatsoever. He turned his head slightly. Your Highness? Yes, Captain? You have not activated your nighttime security grid. A pause. Then, very quietly. I do not believe it is necessary. Trust. Not the political kind. Not the performative kind. Personal trust. The realization settled somewhere deep in his chest, heavy and unfamiliar. Hours later, as sleep finally began to pull at him, she spoke again, voice softened by the threshold of dreams. When you are near, my mind is quiet. He did not sleep much after that. The next morning confirmed what he had begun to suspect. This was no longer cultural curiosity. She trusted him specifically. Not the uniform. Not the title. Him. Later that afternoon, during a strategy briefing with station officials, he noticed something else. She tracked his position constantly. Not obviously, Eris Tallery was far too composed for obviousness, but her gaze found him in every reflection, every shift of light. When an aide stepped too quickly toward her, Adrian adjusted instantly. The aide never even realized the movement had been intercepted. But she did. After the meeting, she said quietly, You reacted before the threat fully formed. That is the objective. You guard as though failure is impossible. Failure meant her life. So yes, impossible. That night, as artificial starlight spilled across the chamber again, she studied him with that same thoughtful intensity. Captain Adrian, may I ask a personal question? He hesitated. Within reason. Do humans choose whom they trust, or does trust occur without conscious intent? He considered that longer than expected. Both, he admitted. And you? She asked. Is your vigilance purely professional? He met her gaze. Yes, he said. It was the safest answer. She seemed to sense the incompleteness anyway, but did not challenge it. Instead, she settled beneath the covers and closed her eyes. After a long silence, she murmured, I have had many guards. He said nothing. None have ever made the dark feel unimportant. Something shifted inside him at that. He stared out at the drifting stars beyond the viewport and realized a quiet, inconvenient truth. The mission was changing. Because somewhere between the trust exercises and the sleepless nights, protecting her had stopped feeling like an assignment, and started feeling like something he would choose, even without orders. By the end of the second week, the station had formed an opinion that Adrian and Princess Eris Tallery were a couple. It wasn't just the diplomats whispering. The maintenance AI had updated its logs to flag them as high-probability bond pair. Security drones hovered slightly closer when they walked together. Even the food replicators seemed to prioritize them in sequence, as though sensing their unusual coordination. Adrian ignored it all with the kind of disciplined focus he had honed over years in combat zones. Nothing about this assignment was life-threatening, yet it was rapidly becoming the most excruciatingly complicated mission of his career. The human capacity for emotional awareness, he realized bitterly, was both his advantage and his curse. It all came to a head during a formal diplomatic reception in the station's central atrium. Eris moved beside him with serene precision, keeping her luminous fingers lightly brushing his sleeve, a casual contact she considered minimal, a profound event everyone else interpreted as scandalous. His internal alarms went off with every step. Captain, she murmured, your pulse has accelerated. Is someone threatening me? No, he forced calm. I am monitoring the environment. She tilted her head. Curious. There is no threat, yet your cardiovascular system is behaving irregularly. Why? He gritted his teeth. Humans are sensitive. A nearby ambassador caught that phrase. Later, it became part of the gossip circulating among the station staff. The human is sensitive, they whispered, snickering. As the evening progressed, Eris's curiosity grew. She requested a trust demonstration in the middle of the reception. The simplest interpretation would be harmless. For Adrian, it was catastrophic. She extended her hand, palm open, and invited him to let her guide him in a minor ceremonial dance. Every eye in the room turned toward them. Some diplomats assumed an official engagement was underway. He tried to remain stoic, performing each movement with the precision of a soldier trained to follow orders, yet every subtle touch sent shockwaves through his nervous system. Your reactions are fascinating, Eris whispered, adjusting her pace to match his. You maintain focus despite physiological response. Humans are unpredictable. Focused on your safety, he said, exhaling sharply. Ah. Predictable priorities. Intriguing. She released his hand, but a moment later brushed her fingers against his sleeve again as she adjusted her ceremonial robe. His head snapped up. She hadn't even noticed. Behind the scenes, rumors were intensifying. Security officers exchanged baffled glances. One logistics officer muttered under his breath, I don't know if he's guarding her or being tamed. The AI, ever literal, began tracking their proximity, producing charts of the frequency and duration of their accidental touches. The following morning, Adrian received a report. Princess Eris had requested he remain near her during a meditation exercise in the observation dome. She explained earnestly that it improved her focus to have her human protector nearby. He spent an hour arguing that he could monitor remotely and maintain full situational awareness. She countered with calm logic. Your proximity produces measurable reductions in my stress indicators. This is optimal for our objectives. He swallowed. Nothing in his training had prepared him for being out-argued by someone who was half his size and slept in a bed 3 times larger than him. Later, while reviewing station security logs, she asked softly, Do you feel your mind is clearer when I am absent? No, he admitted after a pause. It's duller. She blinked slowly, processing the revelation. Interesting. The effect is reciprocal. He stared at her. That one sentence broke through years of professional detachment. Humans guarded not only bodies but people. They didn't just prevent harm, they invested themselves emotionally. And she had just recognized it. At dinner that evening, a human pilot approached him discreetly. Kid, he whispered, nodding toward Eris. If that princess asked you to jump into a lava pit, you'd do it without blinking. And she knows it. Not exactly lava, Adrian muttered. It's the same principle, the pilot said. Humans are intense. Unpredictable. She's hooked. Adrian's jaw tightened. The pilot's grin was infuriatingly accurate. Back in her quarters, Eris watched him organize tactical reports. Her sensors had logged slight tension in his shoulders, and she noted that he repeatedly adjusted his seating to maintain optimal proximity without appearing intrusive. Captain, she said quietly, why do humans engage in such careful calculations when observing someone they care about? He looked up sharply. Care about? I am your protector, Your Highness. Yes, she agreed. But the precision, it is not required for mere professionalism. It is emotional. He froze. That word had no place in his mission parameters. He had trained to suppress it, ignore it, and classify it as irrelevant. And yet here it was, exposed by a 5-foot-tall royal with luminous skin and calm blue eyes. You are aware, she continued softly, that my own physiological readings indicate a rising baseline when you are present. Yes, he said, trying to maintain tone. It is expected. Protective measures induce temporary stress adaptation. Her expression softened in a way that made his pulse spike anyway. I believe, she said carefully, that humans are exceptional in this regard. You do not merely guard. You invest. And I appreciate it. He wanted to protest. He wanted to cite regulations, military doctrine, interspecies protocol. Nothing in the manual prepared him for being thanked with that much sincerity. Instead, he nodded stiffly and returned to his reports, though his hands were shaking slightly. Later that night, in the observation dome, the stars reflected off her calm, unreadable face. When absent, she whispered, my thoughts are unsettled. I do not rest well. He took a slow step closer, instinctively. Then I stay, he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Her eyes widened just slightly. You do not need to. I stay, he repeated. For a long moment neither moved. Around them, the vast expanse of stars and the quiet hum of the station pressed in, but in that stillness, Adrian realized something he had not expected. The most dangerous part of his mission was no longer external threats, no longer assassins or political sabotage. It was being near someone who had the power to dismantle his professional composure with a single, measured observation. And the truth, unspoken but undeniable, was that he did not mind. The princess exhaled softly and allowed herself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. That one small gesture sent his pulse skyrocketing in ways no combat scenario ever had. He watched the stars with one eye, and her with the other, fully aware that the next 2 weeks would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, professionalism, and human resilience, and in ways that were far more terrifying, far more exhilarating, and far more rewarding than any battlefield could ever be. By the 3rd week, Adrian realized that the mission was no longer about guarding Princess Eris from external threats. The real challenge was navigating the subtle, unspoken rules of proximity and trust that she insisted upon, rules that defied every military protocol he had ever learned. She had requested that he remain near her at all times, even during activities that had nothing to do with security. A simple walk through the observation deck became a measured dance of placement, distance, and timing. If he fell too far behind, she would tilt her head and murmur, "You are less effective at this distance." Too close, and his armor brushed her robes, eliciting a quiet but unmistakable tension in his chest. Every interaction was a test, though she never admitted it. When he opened a door first, she would pause at the threshold, observing his movements with subtle fascination. When he maintained his stoic composure, she noted his discipline. When he faltered, even slightly, she smiled. That smile was worse than any ambush he had ever faced. The station, of course, noticed. Rumors proliferated faster than news censors could track them. Staff whispered about the human who couldn't resist the princess, while the AI repeatedly flagged their proximity statistics. Adrian ignored it all, but it gnawed at him that even in a galaxy full of wonders, every being seemed to understand the tension between them except for him and Eris. Then came the night when the rotation system briefly threatened to reassign him to another sector. A sense of unease had settled in his chest he could not shake. Protocol dictated compliance, yet the thought of her alone, even for a short period, was unbearable. He found her in the royal quarters before he could even finish processing the reassignment notice. "You've returned early," she noted, as if observing a simple fact. "I requested an adjustment," he said, not elaborating. She tilted her head, eyes softening. "You do not need to justify your presence. I am aware of the rotation schedule. This is not about duty." "I know," he admitted, almost unconsciously. Silence stretched, dense and intimate, broken only by the gentle hum of the station. She stepped slightly closer, and he could feel the subtle warmth radiating from her in a way that was almost physical, though she was careful to remain composed. "You realize," she said quietly, "that this arrangement is unusual. Other guards do not remain continuously within reach, yet my stress indicators are lower when you do." "I realize," he replied, voice steady, though the truth was far more complicated. Humans were not supposed to be affected by proximity like this, but somehow, he found himself tethered to her presence. Not by duty, but by something entirely different. She lowered herself onto the bed, patting the empty side as she had before, and for the first time, Adrian did not panic. Instead, he assessed the situation with the same precision he applied to battlefield threats. This was a risk of a different kind, emotional, uncharted, unpredictable. But it was a risk he was willing to take. He lay down beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance, and for the first few minutes, nothing happened except the soft, even rhythm of her breathing. Then she spoke, low and measured, yet carrying a vulnerability he had not expected. "When you are near," she murmured, "my mind is quiet. My thoughts are stable." He swallowed hard, realizing that she was not requesting him out of protocol, cultural obligation, or experiment. She was seeking the same comfort he had unconsciously begun to crave. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly, without hesitation. She studied him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You are certain?" "Yes," he confirmed. "I stay because it is necessary." Her hand drifted lightly toward his, as if testing the boundaries of this new, unspoken agreement. He did not pull away. Instead, he closed the distance slightly, letting their fingers brush together. The touch was brief, almost imperceptible, yet it carried more meaning than any declaration or protocol could. "Captain Adrian," she said softly, "your presence has altered more than my stress readings. It has changed my perception of security entirely. I am aware of no external threat when you are near." He exhaled, feeling an unfamiliar tension dissolve from his chest. "That is exactly the point." Outside, the stars drifted past the viewport in slow, infinite patterns, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy. Yet within the quiet confines of the chamber, time felt suspended. All the calculations, protocols, and tactical measures that had dominated his life seemed suddenly irrelevant. She made one last, deliberate motion, intertwining her fingers with his and letting them rest naturally together. "I have recorded all relevant observations," she murmured. "Trust levels, physiological stability, emotional responses. The data suggests this is beneficial." He shook his head slightly, a half-laugh escaping his lips. "Are you documenting our relationship?" "Thoroughly," she replied, completely serious. Adrian groaned softly, leaning back to glance at the station lights reflecting off the walls. "You're impossible. And you," she said with a hint of warmth, "are necessary." For a long moment, they simply remained there, hands linked, the station humming quietly around them. Outside, civilizations moved through space in predictable patterns, but humans, Adrian thought, were unique in one way. They chose connection, they chose loyalty, and they chose courage, not for glory, not for reward, but because it mattered. "Then we are agreed," he said finally, voice soft but resolute. "I guard you, in every sense that matters." Her faint smile widened, luminous eyes reflecting the distant stars. "In that case, Captain Adrian, consider my bed as your new post." He tightened his grip slightly, fully aware that this assignment was no longer about safety, protocol, or orders. It was about trust, about courage, about a bond neither of them could have predicted but both now embraced. And somewhere in the galaxy, amid countless species, battles, and treaties, humans continued to earn their legend not by strength or technology alone, but by protecting hearts as fiercely as they protected lives. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, content for the first time in weeks. He was exactly where he was meant to be, beside a princess who had asked him to stay, and for once, he had no intention of leaving. The station remained quiet, the stars drifted, and two hearts, human and Archelian, began their own measured orbit, bound by trust, courage, and a shared understanding that neither protocol nor protocol alone could ever define.